This is the Austin Matt Podcast, episode 19. I'm Austin.
This is Matt.
And this week we're gonna...
can we do that again? Sorry, I only recently hit puberty, so my voice is squeaking.
Let me breathe real quick. This is the Austin and Matt Podcast, episode 19. I'm Austin.
This is Matt.
And this week we watched The Empty Man, not to be confused with The Inside Man, starring Denzel Washington. But before we get into that, Matt, what else did you watch this week?
I watched quite a bit. The number one highlight that I'm going to talk about first was The Princess Bride. And it was the first time I watched The Princess Bride with my kids. They're both 5, turning 6 pretty soon. They didn't like it as much as I remember liking it at their age. But the best thing about it was, like, you've seen Princess Bride, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was like watching the movie with the little kid from the movie. My kid got annoyed at the kissing at all the same parts. He talked, like, the part where he stops, like the grandpa stops and he's like, she doesn't get eaten by the eels this time. My kid was like, is she gonna get eaten by the eels? Like, getting really nervous. Like, every single beat that little kid hit, my kid hit the same beat. It was really funny. So I enjoyed that. My wife was like, you have the most ridiculous grin on your face watching this movie with your kids, because I was excited to watch it with them. So that was a lot of fun. It's a classic. Bill and Ted Face the Music. So I've seen the first one and the second one. It's been a long time, a really long time. And so I finally watched Bill and Ted Face the Music tonight. And I think because I'm not a super hardcore fan of the originals, I liked this a lot more because of it. Like, we work with someone who had told me they didn't love it, and I watched it and, like, genuinely loved it and felt for real emotions at the end and was like, this really works for me. This is fun. This is funny. It had some really funny stuff going on. I liked it quite a bit, but
I really thought you were gonna go like the opposite way on that.
No,
like, like, I don't have like hard feelings for it. It's like I didn't care for the movie, because that's what I've been hearing. It's like, blah, it's fine. But I'm really glad you liked it. I haven't watched it yet, so that makes me hopeful that it'll be a good time.
To see Keanu Reeves without a beard after so long is weird. Like, he just looks so different. It's bizarre.
It's a 25-year-old man again.
Yeah, really. Alex Winters did a good job. All the other people did great. I thought it was fun. It was nothing that disappointed me. But the last thing I watched, which, full honesty, I have like 20 minutes of the last episode left. I was trying to get to it today and I could not find the time to get to it. But Mare of Easttown, it's on HBO. It has Kate Winslet in it. One of the best detective mysteries that I've watched in a really, really, really long time. And it's good. It reminds me a lot of the movie Gone Baby Gone, where it takes place kind of in a small town where everybody kind of knows everybody and people are doing shady things a lot of the time. And she's just kind of a detective who she's just trying to figure this out. And it goes in some very interesting places. And I actually had a pretty good idea of the right answer to the mystery pretty early on. I was figuring it out to an extent, but it still didn't take away from the show at all. Like, it was still very, very worth it to watch. So I liked it a lot. Yeah. But that's pretty much all that I watched. What'd you watch?
I didn't get around to watching really anything this week, which is a little bit sad. However, so one thing that I'm going to talk about real quick is, so I guess back in 2008, they decided that they wanted to make a version of Pokemon that was just dinosaurs and call it like Dinosaur King.
Oh yeah, my kids have totally watched that. My kid loves Dinosaur King.
Yeah, to the point of where they have the same voice actors from Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the main character, same person who voices Ash Ketchum, like, just catching like little voices where like the big evil scientist is the voice of Meowth, and like that's all me and my wife have really been talking about today. It's just like, oh yeah, like that's totally freaking Jesse right there.
Yeah,
and it's like, whoa, where's James at? And like just trying to like figure out the voices to what it is. And the only way to compare, I guess, Jurassic King, Dinosaur King, I can't remember, to Pokemon is that the main character actually has a good relationship with their father and he's not just randomly gone. So that's nice.
Was there ever, I only watched like the first season or two of Pokemon. Did they ever explain like what the deal with Ash's dad was?
I do not remember at all. And I've watched a lot of Pokemon, like at least like up to the first 4 generations of Pokemon I've seen almost every episode. So
Wow.
and I even went back into Alola and watched some of that too. And I don't think there's ever an answer given about his dad. He did become a Pokemon champion though. So that's cool after 20 years.
Ash did?
Ash did, yeah, finally.
So one thing I'm reading here is that someone once claimed that his father is somebody who is on a Pokemon adventure of their own.
He's gonna come back and be like, "Are you my son?" I'm not sure about that. But so that was today. But one thing I forgot to talk about last week that I watched was The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is actually one of my favorite movies. And everybody that talks to you about it either like love the movie or like they just think it's stupid.
I love that movie. I am on the camp.
Okay.
Of that movie. In fact, like watching that movie for the first time with my wife, I had to stop and pause it, and I was like, "Do you know all the times in my life where you were like, why are you so zoned out?" I was like, this show is like a perfect portrait of what it's like to have ADHD sometimes when I am just like there's a scene where he's having a ridiculous overblown fight with Adam Scott.
Yeah.
And that is like so much of my life where I'm just like, yeah, suddenly I'm in a movie where I'm fighting someone in a freaking ridiculous way. A good movie. I think that's one of the first things Ben Stiller had done in a really long time that I was like, this is really, 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 really good. Like so impressed with him. So
Like when I was actually looking at the cast of the movie, it was like, why? Like we have all of these comedian actors who are like splitting between like serious roles and comedian roles. Like Kristen Wiig.
yeah,
Is that her name? Yeah,
Yep.
she's in it. She's pretty funny throughout it. But I can't remember. You just barely said his name.
Ben Stiller,
No,
Adam
the
Scott.
one that he has a fight with. Adam Scott. Yeah, like Adam Scott's in there, and he's just 100% douchebag. Like, pretty much just like, hey, we liked you in Step Brothers, and we like that role that you played as like an asshole. Come do that here.
Well, that's what I love about Adam Scott is like the first thing I ever saw him in was Step Brothers, and I was just like, that guy. Well, technically speaking, the first thing I saw him in was Boy Meets World, but I didn't really remember him as someone from Boy Meets World.
Doesn't
But
count.
I remember seeing him in Step Brothers, and I was just like, that guy looks like an a-hole, and he just had that look, and I was like, this poor guy is stuck playing a-holes for the rest of his career, and then suddenly he was on Parks and Rec as a freaking huge dork, and I was like, oh my gosh, like. And he's so much better at being the dork that he is in Parks and Rec than he was the a-hole from Step Brothers. It's crazy to me that he... Okay, also, technically speaking, he was also in Star Trek First Contact. So I technically saw Adam Scott quite a bit as a younger kid. And then he moved on to like more adult things that I saw when I was an adult. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Still my favorite quote from him in like any movie is from Step Brothers is when he goes up to the treehouse. Will Ferrell shows him his abs, and he's like, "You see that? Haven't had a carb in 3 years." Just so stupid.
Yeah.
Anyways, so back to The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. It's the reason why I like the movie so much is just it's a complete character transformation throughout the entire movie. And yeah, like a lot of like the daydreaming things, like it goes out in the wild, but like it still has a pretty good meaning to it. And then what was funny is I was watching it with my wife, and I was watching it pretty late, like 2:00 in the morning, and she's like struggling to stay up, and she's like, I want to see what the freaking picture is. And like that was like her whole intrigue. And then finally the picture comes up, and she's like, I thought it was gonna be like some animals or something. Just like, what the bed? I was like, this has like a whole meaning behind it. But no, it's not animals. So she wasn't impressed. I'll say that. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite movies always gets me like wanting to do things. I wouldn't exactly say like inspiration, but it's just like, yeah, man, like maybe I should go do something. So anyways, so Matt, this week we watched The Empty Man. Now, for anybody who's listening, here's kind of a quick synopsis and emphasis on quick here because there's a lot that happens. But so on the trail of a missing girl, an ex-cop comes across a secretive group attempting to summon a terrifying supernatural entity known as the Empty Man. Soon he finds himself in the middle of their plans and decides to try to take them down. Doing this has proven to be tougher than he expected, and after a storm of twists and turns, he discovers that he is in fact The Next Empty Man, and was born just 4 days ago. I'm curious, Matt, what did you enjoy about this movie? You did write a lot, so I'm interested to hear.
So this is probably one of the first movies that I've watched in a long time where I genuinely went in knowing absolutely nothing about the movie. I had not seen a trailer.
It's so great, right?
Yeah, well, the movie itself is so great.
No, just going in blind, like not knowing what this movie is about.
Ooh. Yes, and I follow movie news too closely to usually not know something about a lot of movies that are coming out, or at least having seen the trailer. So that was kind of an interesting experience. That's one of the things that I loved about it, though, is that the plot goes all over the place. And the movie started, and it's like, so the movie started, and they're up in the mountains, and it says day one, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is going to be one of those horror movies where they're like stuck in the mountains the whole time. And then suddenly that whole plot totally ends. Like everybody there besides one guy straight up dies, and then it's like, boom, 2018, and then we're following this like ex-cop. And then I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of got this like Slender Man vibe, and it's kind of a story that's just about this creepy creature that's killing high schoolers, and then suddenly it becomes a completely different movie, and it's a movie about a weird cult, and then like it just so many times subverted any kind of expectations that I may have had for it, that I was just like, although all of these like twists and turns didn't always work that effectively, I really respected the twists and the turns, where I was just like, okay, this is not what I was expecting, and it's fun, and it's weird, and it's working well enough. And so I really, really enjoyed kind of that idea of it. My favorite twist and turn that I really saw was kind of the cult aspect. Like, that was when I was getting the most interested. That was when I was definitely getting into it a lot more. And then it went places kind of after that where I wasn't as into it. Probably like my favorite scene that was probably the creepiest for me was when he was watching the video of Manifestation 13, I think it was. And it felt very like creepypasta, which kind of made sense because it also kind of felt a little bit like a Slender Man movie, a creepypasta thing before it was a lot of other things. And that whole video, and I don't even really understand what was happening. Had he like cut himself and was still alive, and he was like pulling out his guts and like using his blood? Is that what I was getting from that? Is that what you kind of got?
I cannot tell you.
That's the feeling I was getting. Yeah. So that was a really weird scene, but I enjoyed that quite a bit. Like it worked. It was creepy. The visuals too. Just like, honestly, like when it all comes down to it, I don't think that this movie was worthy of those kinds of visuals. Like honestly, like this was a pretty mediocre movie with visuals that's like, wow, if they had a much better script here, just the look of so many of these shots were just fantastic. And even kind of looking at the director, his name's David Pryor. He's directed documentaries about David Fincher movies, and so it seems like he's at least studied David Fincher movies really well. And I was definitely getting Fincher vibes from the visuals here, and I was like, that makes sense that this guy has taken an active interest in David Fincher, because he's certainly capable of kind of mimicking not necessarily the style but the look of some David Fincher shots. And so I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It looked really fantastic a lot of the times, and so that was a treat to be able to see such great visuals for a lot of it. Last thing though, Stephen Root. I love that guy. He was do you know who he is when I say Stephen Root?
Yeah. You
do know? Okay, lots of times you don't know who I'm talking about. I love Stephen Root. Anytime that dude shows up in anything, I'm just like super excited. And I just thought he filled the role really, really well. He didn't have a ton of screen time, but I was super happy to see Stephen Root in it. So that's kind of mostly what I like. I really, really enjoyed just some of those, like, I mean, I guess back on the visuals, just some of those shots, like all of the visuals when the teens were on the bridge blowing in bottles, like it just looked so good.
Yeah.
And then there was one of the coolest transitions I've seen where he drops a map down on a table and the camera zooms in on the map, and the map like actually becomes the physical world, and it kind of like goes down into this forest and zooms, and then it was just like, oh, that was really surprisingly well done, like for a movie that was pretty under the radar of everybody. I mean, this movie, it looks like it was filmed in 2017 and nobody ever distributed it until now, and so it had a hard time even getting picked up. So yeah, I liked it a lot.
Dope, man. I love that you brought up the one part where it's like, oh, like I thought this was going to be like a movie in the mountains, and then it completely changes. That whole pre-story was like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not upset about it, actually. I did like that they added that element in there and gave us like more of that firsthand experience of like the WTF of is what's happening, and really just integrated that rhythm of like, first night you hear him, second night you see him, third night you feel him, and it's like, yeah, and he just freaking kills people. So that's pretty crazy. So really like that, and enjoyed a lot of those elements that they were introducing very early on for the feeling. So one thing that really kind of got into me through this movie is they do a lot of jump scares, and normally for like a lot of horror movies, I'm not the biggest fan for jump scares. It's just like, oh, like it's gimmicky, whatever, like you can't use like actual like horror elements, but like some of the jump scares that were in this movie like really actually creeped me out.
See, I was the opposite. Every single time a jump scare was coming up, I was like, cue the jump scare, and it just freaked me out at all. It didn't scare me, it didn't work for me. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So the one that I want to point out the most that would like just like eerie to me was he's at the cabin, he's watching the manifestation like 13 or something like that, I think is what you said, and like they're making an emphasis of the teddy bear in the back, and you're like, yeah, something's gonna happen to that freaking teddy bear, and you just know that it's gonna happen, and then cuts back, teddy bear doesn't move at all, and then it's like it's back on his face, and then it cuts back and the teddy bear's just gone. And you're like, no, man, this is where someone gets like jumped or like horrified or something. On a side note, not really a jump scare. I do love the scene where he's like slowly crossing the lake and all of the people just start walking, and then he steps back a little bit, and then they all just like move forward a little bit, and then he does it again, and then they all just start like running at him, and he's like, oh no, starts running away.
That was probably my favorite scene. That was when I was getting most into it, when he walked up and he saw all the people running around that fire. I was like, that is so creepy and cool. And I don't know if you recognize like the scene during the very first, when she saw that figure in the snow, when she would walk towards it, it would take a step back. And when she took a step back, it would take a step forward. So all those people around that thing mimicked the same thing. And I was like, oh, that's like cool. It kind of ties into what happened in the first of the movies. So like that scene, when the fire went up into the sky and all those weird things happened, I was like, oh my gosh, whatever. But like everything kind of leading up to that was so cool.
Yeah. One of the things that I did also enjoy is just kind of like the general idea behind this. So you mentioned like it does kind of fit into like a creepypasta or like a Slenderman type thing. And yeah, like the posters that they had too, where it's like just flat black poster, but like, is it really flat black? And like you can like start to make out like figures and things like that, and just the whole emphasis of like you stare into the abyss as the abyss stares back at you. Just like a creepy thoughts, and how they also go into like, if you think about something and if you think that something is there, something may actually be there. So like you're manifesting this being based upon like your thought, and it's like, yeah, like that's a little creepy. I do have some, of course, issues with some of it that I'll talk about a little bit later, but before I go into my stuff, Matt, what are some of the things that you just couldn't quite enjoy with this movie?
Well, the first thing I have to talk about is who wears long johns. Nobody wears, like, the fact that this dude, like, every single time he was in bed, he was wearing long johns. It was like, that's not, what is it, 1940? I just don't believe for a second that a normal human man would be wearing long johns.
Cool, man.
It didn't seem that cold anywhere they went in this movie. It looked to me like he was in California or maybe New York. I don't know where he was supposed to.
Hey man, he grew up in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, also, what is there some kind of joke beyond that, like behind that? Like, what? Why did he feel the need to point that out all the time?
So if you, as he was like going through the file of like who he is and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that he identifies with is that an article that it's like raised in San Francisco. So I mean, with him only being a couple days old, like that's just wired into his being. That's like, I'm a cop. I was raised in San Francisco, and I'm gonna like figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. I did not. I mean, honestly, like the creepypasta stuff really worked sometimes, but when it wasn't working, it really wasn't working. Like, really, the first 45 minutes of the movie, when he was looking for the empty man, I was like, I'm convinced this was a movie that started out being written about like a Slender Man movie. Like, it just felt so. The Empty Man, the Slender Man, like this, the whole thing with Slender Man, high schoolers kind of got obsessed with it, and there was all this like lore around it and weird things that high schoolers were doing. Like, to me, it just honestly felt so much like it was supposed to be a Slender Man movie. I could be wrong, but it just seemed. And then once we got into the more creepypasta type stuff, especially that movie that happened that he watched, the Manifestation 13, I was just like, this just feels. It just felt weird to me. I do think the ending fell a little flat for me. It's because I've seen movies that go to weird places and have weird twists. Like one option, I mean, one example of that is a movie called The Endless, which was a movie that I really liked, that had a really weird ending, that didn't totally make sense, that didn't give you all the answers, and it super worked for me, where I was like, I don't need the answers. And I even had my own kind of interpretation on it, that a sequel to the movie kind of laid to rest for me. Like my theory on the ending of the movie was completely off, and that was still okay because I kind of had got my own meaning out of it, and I really liked it. This was a movie where like it doesn't really give all the answers. Something way out of left field happens that was completely unexpected, and I wasn't having it. It was kind of like, oh, some interesting stuff is happening here. This whole idea that he was manifested into being by human thought 3 days ago to fill this role as the what is it? The empty, was he the empty man, or was he like the vessel for the empty man? I'm
So
not.
yeah, from my understanding, the lore is that the empty man is kind of like what everyone refers to it as, but however, the empty man is actually the host of what the real thing is.
Yeah.
But it goes by many names, but the empty man is what it's referred to in this case, just because of who the host is.
Yeah, and I just the ending didn't really vibe with me. I was just kind of, it was interesting, and as for like a lot of other things that had happened in the movie that I really enjoyed, the ending was just kind of like it fell super flat for me, to be honest. So
to be honest, I'm kind of in that same boat too. It was actually pretty funny where me and my wife were out driving today, and she was like, so like what is the actual ending for the movie? And I was like, yeah. She's like, she was really into it for a while, and then it's like the whole ending thing was going on, and she's like, how does that work? Like, what is that? And it's like, yeah, like they're not really giving any answers here, but like I guess he just was never actually alive. He was just created 4 days ago somehow. He doesn't live where he actually lives. He doesn't have a neighbor. It's just he is the new empty man, I guess.
And if they had even kind of given us like, what is the empty man's goal? What is the empty man doing to the world? What is he like? What is he working towards? That would have been more interesting. But it was just kind of like, you're this vessel. That's it. Like it gave an answer to what he was and why he was there. It didn't give an answer to like, what's going to happen after this? What does this mean for the world? Or what does this mean for, like, I would have liked a little bit more of an explanation there.
You know, man, for somebody who was like Stephen Root whenever he's on screen, like I just love him. You didn't pay attention a whole lot to what he was saying then.
So what was he saying? Maybe it's
So
just
the
because I
ambition of
was
it-
too busy being like in love with Stephen Root. That may have been the
Could be.
problem.
So as he's giving kind of like his I guess his preach, he talks about everybody will come together once again into the life one way or another, and that is like the ambition of the empty man. So pretty much his goal is to kill everybody and bring them all back together.
Okay, yeah, I guess I did miss that. I was too busy just loving him.
Stephen Root was actually not a good part for me, but I'm glad you appreciate him.
So you hated him in this, but do you hate him in general?
No, of course
Okay.
not.
Okay.
Just in this, I was like, I hated the role that he played, which is like almost put me to sleep. There's still some questions that like I need answers to, or that like I really have no question of like answers about. Like, some people live past 3 days. Like, there's no way these people like discover into this cult and then like within 3 days they die, or like you're just gonna run out of people in no time. So like, how does somebody live past 3 days? And like, is it just like if you're accepting to the empty man, then you live past the 3 days? And if you oppose him, he just freaking marks you in the face with some scissors? Like, how does that work?
Or somehow gets you to stab yourself in the face with scissors. Like, that didn't. I would have liked a little more there too. Yeah.
Really, what I would have liked is it's funny that you keep mentioning Slenderman, because around this time when this movie was going on, like, Slenderman was being filmed and it was released, I think, in like 2018, I want to say.
Oh, there was a Slenderman movie that came out?
Yeah, there was. And
I didn't even know that.
to me, I think this movie was actually better than this actual Slenderman movie. So if they had to like change their whole story because of the Slenderman, I feel bad, because they had a lot more going on in this movie versus Slenderman. Putting that all aside, it goes into like, there's like this killing thing where people die after 3 days, kind of like The Ring, and like that's what we're kind of introduced to. And then we're brought into a cult, and then from the cult, it's like this whole just like parasite type thing. And really, I would have liked them just to commit to one thing, like either make this something where you die in 3 days after you summon the Slenderman. I mean, sorry, Empty Man. Or like just make it a cult thing where people think that it's actually the Empty Man killing him, but really it's just this cult going out killing people. Like, give me one or the other.
Yeah. See, and that's so funny that that's one of your dislikes, because that's one of the things I liked. I was like, it was all over the place and it was kind of fun.
Yeah. I think if we only had the two, I probably would have been fine. But the fact that they created somebody 4 days prior and gave him like this entire fake life to like be this new host is where it was like, all right, like I've had enough of like this weaving game. Whatever.
Yeah.
that was kind of where I was at with it. In all though, like, I don't hate it for being a horror movie. I always have low standards for horror movies when I go into them. So this one was a little better. I love the visuals that you brought up. I think I was to give it a score. It was like 5 out of 10 for me. I may not watch it ever again, but like, if someone's looking for something on HBO and the horror wise, I'll probably bring it up.
Yeah. Like, if someone was truly out of things to watch on HBO and we're just like, I'm looking for something weird, I would be like, okay, cool, Empty Man. Like, it's not great, but it's an experience. It's an interesting thing to do, I guess. I would suggest to somebody. I honestly would kind of like to see the movie about the dudes in the mountains. Like, had it just been a movie about the people in the mountains, I probably would have like enjoyed just that movie.
Yeah, that was a good premise.
Yeah.
Anyways,
and then
Matt,
suddenly that part ends. It was so weird.
what are we watching next week?
Let's take a look.
So on HBO, what I would suggest is Freaky, starring Vince Vaughn.
I added that to my list today. I've been interested in seeing that since it came out because I heard it was a lot of fun. Have you seen it?
I have not.
Let's do it then. That's actually the same girl, I believe, from The Map of Tiny Perfect Things.
It is.
I'm pretty sure.
She's also in Supernatural.
Oh, okay. She is my nephew's like #1 celebrity crush. He loves her. So.
Oh.
Let's do it. I want to do Freaky. If you're good with Freaky, let's do Freaky.
Yeah, man. Let's get freaky.
Okay. Cool. Let's get freaky. Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Austin and Matt podcast, episode 19. Episode 20 looks to be like it's going to be freaky, unless it just randomly disappears from HBO Max.
Yeah. Okay. See you next week. Bye, Lay.
Bye.
Bye. It's like, did one of your lights just go out?
Yeah. Hold on. The plug that it's plugged into, really loose. So they just like whoop. Anyways, as you were saying,